former President Donald Trump is lashing out at evangelical leaders for being disloyal. Take a look.
At least as it stands now, some of these prominent evangelical leaders who backed you last time, they're not yet willing to commit, like Robert Jeffress is not, some others. It seems like many of them are waiting to see how the field takes shape before backing anyone. What is your message to them?
Well, I don't really care. Look, that's a sign of disloyalty. There's great disloyalty in the world of politics, and that's a sign of disloyalty because nobody, as you know, and you would know better than anybody because you do such a great job, nobody has ever done more for right to life than Donald Trump. I put 3 Supreme Court justices who all voted, and they got something that they've been fighting for 64 years or many, many years.
Right.
And nobody thought they could win it. You know, they won. Roe v. Wade, they won. They finally won. And
they finally won. Funny enough, that was not my audio. I cannot blame that on leftist audio. Okay, that was Trump's phone or whatever he was on. But anyway, so look, what's interesting here is he's right. When it comes to the evangelical community, he gave them exactly what they wanted. Roe is no longer the law of the land. It's gone, and millions of people no longer have bodily autonomy in this country. And that's really scary. Now, that said, evangelicals, after they got their win, what did they do? Well, they decided not to turn out because they already got what they wanted. Oops. Sorry. Now, remember, a lot of these people, and I'm talking about the pro-lifers, they're one-issue voters. Now, the thing is that Republicans were never actually supposed to win on this issue. And I'm saying, like, not from a leftist perspective, but I think from a political Republican perspective, them winning on this issue is actually one of the worst things that could happen to them. Because that energy, those voters, they're not turning out anymore for them. It was supposed to be the long, basically the holding the carrot out. Never letting them really have it, but just dangling out in front of their face so that they will turn up to the polls. And that was the whole plan here. Okay. Look, it was, I think back in the 60s, 70s, whatever, Republicans figured out that it turns out our voters really don't care to keep giving tax cuts for the rich. They're not going to turn out for that. They're not going to turn out for deregulation of corporations. They're not going to turn out to give more and more money to wealthy donors. But here's what they will turn out for. We're just going to claim to be pro-life. We're pro-life. We're just protecting the babies because it turns out the liberals, they're murdering the babies. Look at these babies. You don't want them to murder the babies. You got to turn out and vote. Save the babies. So you had this entire generation, and several generations actually, that were basically propagandized to turn out for Republicans because they think in order they had to in order to save the babies from getting chopped up and mutilated. And then dummy Donald Trump shows up and he's like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to appoint the most conservative Supreme Court justices, and they're going to overturn Roe. And that's exactly what they did. And those votes, gone. Gone. Congratulations. Now, again, repealing Roe, Republicans, a lot of Republican politicians knew this game. And so they come out and they say, we're so pro-life. Vote for me. I will protect life. They get into power and they pass tax cuts for the rich and for corporations in deregulated industry, while, of course, also loosening gun laws. Super, super pro-life of them, by the way, and blocking attempts to get health care and to reduce the infant mortality rate. And so, that said, there were, true believers, of course, believers in not being pro-life, but in stripping women of, and of course, not just women, but, trans men, anybody with a uterus, of their bodily autonomy, their rights. Now, those people also got elected, by the way, and thanks to Trump putting the Supreme Court. And so they got rid of Roe. And yet, that is the one issue where voters got a lot of their wins. And so that said, it leads me to the next part of the interview here, where Donald Trump just can't seem to figure out, well, I gave them everything they wanted. Why did they not turn out?
I was a little disappointed because I thought they could have fought much harder during the 22 election, because, they won, and a lot of them didn't fight or weren't really around to fight, and it did energize the Democrats. But a lot of the people that wanted and fought for years to get it, they sort of, I don't know, they weren't there protesting and doing what they could have done.
Why weren't they protesting? What would they protest against? You gave them what they wanted. They got the win. They went home. I mean, it's simple, political, right? This is politics. Again, single issue voters. And so, look, the midterms is a good example of how this Donald Trump basically screwed himself in the Republican Party. Okay, these midterms, look, it favored, or I should say, it featured a lot of very extreme Republican candidates. Some of the ones who, claimed to be very pro-life during these midterms began to scrub their websites of any mention of being pro-life. And of course, you got the hypocrites like, for example, Herschel Walker, right? Herschel Walker, who paid for many, many, many abortions.
This election is about the people.
Was it? Was it about the people? I don't think so. And so, look, he got caught up in that hypocrisy. He ended up losing his election. You had Dr. Oz, who bizarrely said, "Oh yeah, I want politicians to get between you and your doctor when it comes to reproductive health care." Oh, that's the message you're going to go with. Look, these candidates got destroyed. Evangelicals stayed home, whereas Democrats, who first, who didn't believe that Republicans were actually going to do this, and I'm talking about, by the way, the politicians. Okay, so Democrat politicians, they knew the gimmick too. I think that's why they didn't codify Roe v. Wade when they had a chance to do so numerous times. They would never codify it, and so they're like, "Look, Republicans play this game. They, say that they're going to repeal Roe and they get votes, whatever. We say we're going to protect reproductive rights and we get votes. So why are we going to actually do anything about it when it's advantageous politically to both of our sides?" They didn't think that Donald Trump was actually going to do what he said he was going to do, which was appoint these extremist justices that would get rid of Roe. That's why they were caught so flat-footed. That's why there was the shock and surprise. Oh my God! We didn't know this was going to happen. Yeah, I know. And then, of course, that's why you also saw the first few days, Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats fundraising off of it, which was frustrating. So that said, their candidates did lose the midterms, the more extremist ones, the ones that were still running on or still had a record of saying very extreme things about, abortion and being massively anti-abortion, anti-choice, etc. And then also the other thing is these candidates, well, they were going along with the big lie. And so you didn't have turnout by Republicans, but you had massive turnout by Democrats. And so that's why you have a very narrow GOP House when it was supposed to be a red wave. That said, Trump, it is funny to watch him go after evangelical voters. And suddenly now. But here's the thing. Jeffress, speaking of Robert Jeffress, one of the big evangelical leaders that Trump had mentioned in the video, saying, well, I'd happily support Trump if he became the Republican Party's nominee. That means Jeffress, you're looking for somebody else. Somebody a little bit more palatable to them. And so I think Donald Trump, definitely does not understand. Well, he doesn't understand a lot of things, but he didn't understand why evangelicals flocked to him. It wasn't because he's a good and moral person, right? No, it's because, look, they said, well, he's going to do the things, he's going to give me the wins. He's going to give us the wins on abortion. And I don't care who he is as a person. And they'll justify it with some like, oh, God sends his messengers and sometimes the most imperfect vessels or some crap. But that's how they viewed him. And now if they don't have a reason to support Donald Trump, they won't. Now, if he becomes the nominee in 2024, then of course they'll line up behind him, as they always would. But until they have to make that choice, I don't think they're going to choose Donald Trump. And that is what pisses Trump off the most. I did these things for you. You're not returning the favor. I want loyalty. And he's not getting it. Now, it's going to be very interesting how evangelicals, who again, huge part of Donald Trump's support in the election in 2020 and 2016 especially, and of course, by the way, how they impact the general, again, if they're not turning out, especially when it comes to the one issue voters that were the pro-life voters. It's almost as if there's going to be that I'm like seeing a huge change here where you can no longer count on that support to show up. And I may be wrong. They might show up. They might find a different culture war issue to glom onto. But there's also the possibility that maybe they won't. And that could be a huge deal come, the 2024 elections. Not just the presidential election, but also, again, we're talking the Republican primary, and we're talking, House races, Senate races. And so it is very, very interesting. And if it's anything like what happened during the midterm elections, it could spell big trouble for the Republican Party.